Greetings. Thank you all so much for joining us for the second MSA Confab Preview online event. And so today's topic is about the online, or today's topic for the online event is the outdoor exhibition. Confab is coming around. It's getting closer and closer with every passing day. And so it is October 3rd and 4th. But leading up to that, we have a lot of things that we have to keep on our to-do list, including applying for shows like the outdoor exhibition that will be happening in Huntsville alongside of Confab. The deadline for that is July 31st. Today is what? July 25th. So start checking off those boxes, take a look at the prospectus. But to help that along, we have 3 of the 4 panelists that are going to be selecting the artworks for this opportunity with us today to help us understand what the process is like, what they're looking for as jurors, and to help answer any questions you may have. To help me with this, myself and Brian Massey, we are coming to you from the Online Panels Committee. So this is one of our components that we do as board members, is this is one of the committees that we serve on. And so we're helping bring this together. So with that said, Brian, what is it that you're up to? Where are you based? And what is it that you get to do during the summer?
I'm currently based in Conway, Arkansas at the University of Central Arkansas. Working on a lot of not a lot of free time, but a lot of my work that I've been putting off during the semesters. I get to work during the summers on my own work, but I am doing a lot of administrative duties. But I've got about 1 week left before that kicks off to be not doing it anymore. So I'm taking as much time as possibly can.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad that you're able to find at least a little bit of time for your art, for your family, and for joining us here. So if you would be so kind, would you help us get started with meeting the people that are going to be speaking about the panel for selection? And so would you introduce our first panelist?
Yes, it gives me a great honor and privilege to introduce to you Julie Ward. Julie holds MFAs in sculpture from the Ohio State University and new media from the University of Cincinnati. Her practice integrates object making, collaborative performances, as well as site responsive sculpture. A longtime advocate for public art, she has exhibited with sculpture trails outside the museum and regional sculpture tours. She's formerly a tenured professor and a head of sculpture at Florida Atlantic University. She now serves as the public art project manager, supporting community-based installations. Join me with a round of applause for having Julie on this board today. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Excellent. Yay, Julie. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Brian. And also on our panel, we have Chris Boyd Taylor. Chris is joining us from Huntsville, Alabama. He's going to be part of the host and the hosting site for this next confab in October. Chris is an associate professor of sculpture at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. He holds fine arts degrees from the Ohio State University and Alfred University. His work explores spectatorship, movement, and color through both studio practice and public commissions. He has exhibited with sculpture trails and numerous outdoor exhibitions, as has completed permanent installations in both national and international sites. A 2023 Fulbright Scholar, Chris brings a dynamic approach to public engagement through sculpture. Thank you so much for being a part of this panel, Chris.
And our third person that we have with us today is Durant Thompson. Durant is professor of sculpture at the University of Mississippi with a BFA from the University of Tennessee and an MFA from my alumni, LSU, Louisiana State University. And 2015, he co-founded the Yonka Sculpture Trail in Knoxville, Mississippi, in partnership with the Arts Council there and the University of Mississippi. In the city of Oxford, he has exhibited widely in public sculpture venues, including sculpture trails and the Rosen Outdoor Sculpture Competition. He serves on the board of directors for the Mid-South Sculpture Alliance, where he chairs the Outdoor Exhibition Committee. Help me welcome today, Durant Thompson.
Thank you so much, Durant, for being a part of this panel. And Brian, thank you for helping with the introductions today. Brian is going to be continuing to help out. If you are live with us online today on YouTube or Facebook, then you can also add questions to the chat and comments there, and Brian will help bring that in. And I, Letitia Buhuyo, get to serve as your moderator today. I'm going to be doing my best to ask questions and to not completely make a disaster about the YouTube streaming. And so we'll see if I can do both jobs. And so here we go. To start us off, panel, if you would be so kind, can you share a little bit about an early experience in public art that led you to this role that you have now within public art? So an early experience that you had making outdoor sculpture and public art that has led you to this type of role where you're helping select it, maybe you coordinate spaces. I can call on you if you want, or you could just jump. Okay. Julie, if you'd be so kind.
I guess like if we go way back, I worked for Inferno Art Foundry right when I got out of undergrad. And so, you know, we were just building all kinds of sculptures, all different kinds of sculptures. And then, moving to Sloss and seeing everything that happens there and being there for quite some time. And then just the trajectory of life has kind of rolled me into this place. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you. Chris, would you be so kind? What was an early experience that you had within outdoor sculpture and or public art that helped you recognize that this is something you want to do, or helped you understand that this is a goal, being in the side of the table, so to speak? Oh, you're muted.
We good now?
Yeah.
So directly after graduate school, I had an opportunity to exhibit at Socrates Sculpture Park in Queens. And that's a kind of a Mark DeSuvero project.
Nice.
And it was really fantastic. There was just some really interesting characters that were part of that whole setup. And very, very community based and community integrated. That setup in particular, people use that sculpture park. You would see people, come with their families. They'd get off work and come through the park. A lot of they were using the sculpture park as a tool to do camps for kids. And I actually got to meet Mark DeSuvero there, and meet his team and kind of the way that they work, and it was just very team based. And coming out of graduate school, it's very me, myself, and I. You're working on your own stuff, trying to make these monumental sculptures, and it gets a little competitive. But it was really refreshing to see this environment where there's so much teamwork going on. And I think DeSuvero's sculpture park at Socrates has served as a model for other sculpture parks. And it was just a really cool thing to be a part of.
Excellent. So getting to be a part of that on that receiving end, then I'm sure on the many ways that you've continued to work, where you're sometimes on the coordinating side as the directing side, helping select sites, but then also continue to show and make. You're sort of like moving back and forth.
Right.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. And Durant, could you share about an early experience that helped lead you to this role or the many roles that you have now?
Well, mine's pretty much directly influenced by Dennis Peacock, who was the head of, I would think he was more like the head of sculpture at Tennessee at the time. He was in charge of the sculpture tour there that was successful for 15 years, I think, is what we're doing. And we're sort of writing a book about that, which he's sort of a founder of. We didn't know it at the time, but it kind of the structure, the template that we use for loan-based programs, he may have been the first one to do that. So I didn't know that when I was working with him, but that was a volunteer work. And then I got to go to grad school at LSU, where Greg Elliott was starting a new sculpture park there. So I helped start that and get it off the ground. When I got done with that, I worked with the Johnson Atelier for a year or so. And so all those things had major impact on outdoor sculpture things. And early on, I went to Storm King and saw that space. And when I was working with Dennis installing his sculptures, I got to go to Navy Pier and install there. So it was like a crash course in multiple levels of outdoor sculpture. And then I've been showing as an artist since the mid 90s. So I've seen kind of both sides. And now as an administrator with the sculpture trail, it's kind of I've seen all the levels. So.
And with that, I'm sure it comes with many stories, both how things work really well and maybe a couple of stories that help us remember what not to do.
Yes, working with the city or community is always the hardest, I think, but administration in general.
Gotcha. But then we need the administration to help make sure that the sculpture
Yes.
can get it. Yes. And so it comes with the territory, I would imagine. But yeah, no, absolutely. You had early on some like multi-level experiences of what outdoor sculpture entailed and getting to help install, it sounds like, as well as install somebody else's and then your own. So excellent. Thank you, Durant. And we lost Chris for a minute, so I hope he pops back in. So keep an eye out. I know he was talking about low battery earlier. And so while we wait on him to come back, obviously, this is a relationship between Huntsville, Alabama, University of Alabama at Huntsville, and Mid-South Sculpture Alliance. So Durant and Julie, how are you involved in Mid-South Sculpture Alliance? How long have you been involved? How did you get involved? So what's your connection to MSA? Julie. Chris.
Really just as a member, and rolling in that capacity, and coming to your conferences, and when I get an opportunity, and yeah, and then I adjuncted with Chris for a little bit at UAH, and so yeah, I'm pretty familiar with all of the sculpture pads that are available, and I think that it'll just be a good install.
Nice.
Theoretically.
Theoretically, yes. In our mind, it is. Well, and thank you for being a longtime member and for coming to our annual events like the upcoming one in Huntsville. And so you won't have far to commute and you can help show us around what to make sure to get to go see. So thank you, Julie. And Durant, what's been your experience with MSA?
So I was recruited, I don't know if it's early or not, but by Isaac Duncan. He was, I think, a few years in, maybe a little more than that, when I started the Yakima Sculpture Trail with our group in Oxford. And he was just a part of that first year. And so I got to learn about MSA and I became a member. And then, of course, Letitia has recruited me to be on the board of directors over time. And so here I am with that. But I would say that Isaac probably made me the most aware in the beginning. And I just kind of was at the edges in the beginning, become a member. And then I really liked being a part of the group for the shows that are available. And then more recently, I've been doing the conferences a little bit more. So that's been nice to see as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Durant. And thank you for your service on the board of directors. And Chris, what's been your involvement as far as being a part of MSA? How are you connected? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry.
All right, there you go.
I went to a confab back in Nashville. I want to say that was 8 years ago or something like that. And I've pretty much been on the edges, peripheral, seeing all the awesome stuff you guys have been doing. And then Kristen Tordella Williams has been nudging me to be more involved. And so I'm taking her up on that and trying to be a more involved member. So.
Excellent. Well, it's one of those components as far as like MSA does offer a lot of opportunities, and it can be opportunities to be able to jump in further like you have this year, especially with Confab coming up, but then all the ways that our network continues to grow and that we get to be a part of this larger organization. And so thank you for being a part of it. And I think I remember, yeah, like Confab in Nashville, that was probably 2016-ish, maybe 17, somewhere in there. Yeah, nice. Well, and thinking of this one and you being on site, thinking about this specific call that we have going on as we prep for Confab, I'm going to try to screen share the images that you sent me of the sites. And so Julie and Chris, if you could tell us a little bit about what people can apply to as they're thinking about applying, that might help somebody if they're debating whether or not to apply or what they can imagine their work doing on site. And so if you could help us elucidate that, that'd be really, really wonderful. I'm trying to share. Is that showing up?
Yeah, so this first image is kind of like you will see no pad there. This is a spot that our architect Christian Reed, who's also on the committee, is interested in getting a public art piece in this site. And we have great facilities who are willing to work with us. And if we see a piece that seems to kind of resonate with the flow of traffic there, the architecture, the foliage, whatever it might be, we will find a way to get it on that site. It might be by pouring a new pad. It may be a piece that's okay with some landscaping around it for those 3 years. Just kind of depends on the piece. But I wanted to just kind of first and foremost offer that out that we don't necessarily have to stay tied to a pad, or we may like specifically see a piece and say, hey, this would be great, on this already existing super wide sidewalk where there's a good amount of traffic and we think students would really appreciate the work. So we have a very giving and a very flexible facilities group that's willing to work with us, and we do have traditional pads as well, and that's I think that's like a 6 foot by 6 foot pad in a really nice spot on campus where there's quite a bit of student traffic that goes by. That's I don't know if you guys remember Verena Baxter, the late Verena Baxter from Chattanooga. Um, it's a nice piece.
So will that piece be continuing to stay, or is that a pad that might be changed out?
It's not going to get changed out, but I just wanted to include some images of some of the work that we have on campus, just so you guys can kind of get to see what campus looks like. Yeah.
Skip.
There we go. Skip. Here's another example of one where we saw an opportunity to put a sculpture in a non-pad site where there's not a ton of student traffic, but enough where students might kind of walk through the arch or bike past it, and that sort of thing. And that's your
Awesome. Yes.
yeah, that's Austin's. I really adore this piece just because I just think I see it as a dinosaur that says hi to me as I walk out of Wilson Hall. I've never asked Austin what he's actually, what is on top of that. Everybody has a different interpretation. I've heard prairie dog too.
I could see that. I was thinking otter.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll ask him. I'll ask him. And thinking about Durant was sharing earlier, Austin Collins had his exhibition or had work in the Tennessee UT sculpture tour years ago, which then inspired him to start a sculpture tour at Notre Dame, which then brought Dennis to show his work at Notre Dame, which is how I got to Tennessee Knoxville for graduate school. So all the networks bring people
Wow.
together. Yes. And then his work being there, so I think all the connections are great.
So this is a nice piece that it was kind of it was powder coated, but it was kind of under duress, and so we actually had it refinished, and we've done that with several pieces. We've had them professionally repainted, and I kind of went, me and the architect Christian, we went to bat for sculpture on campus, and we basically have funding every year for the trail. So, and many times it's used for professional updates to sculptures. You know how sculpture trails are. Sometimes we inherit sculptures, and you know, and that's not always ideal, but sometimes the sculptures are really nice and they're, you know, they really add to the campus. And so depends on the piece, but we have been able to secure funding to help spruce up our trail when needed.
Nice. Oh, thank you for explaining and thinking through those possibilities. And so with it sounds like there are some options. And so maybe Julie, if you want to add into this too, as far as like the selection of the sites, but that there are some potential options for something that's maybe more site specific. Not quite a proposal given the timeline.
Yeah, there are some existing pads, you know, and there's some that are really nice and kind of tucked away, not in the main areas. So, I think that I think that people should just submit, because, you know, it might be perfect for this little tucked away area that you wouldn't necessarily think, that a sculpture would be, you know, and then there are some pads, and just like Chris said, I love the openness of UAH, that they're like, if we see something that we really love, then we're gonna get it here, you know? Yeah.
That's great. Well, and thinking about the idea what you just pitched as far as like, you know, like if you know, to go ahead and apply, maybe it doesn't maybe fit the specific pad, but to go ahead and submit. And so I'm going to screen share the page on the website that describes the call, and then a link to, like, you know, they'll show like the deadline and things like that. And so if you all would be so kind to, as I open that up, what kinds of things that you all as panelists, so I'm going to just like sort of scroll through that. If you all as panelists, what are some things that you keep in mind whenever you're going to be looking at people's applications, their statements? And so any insights that you could share with folks as they're debating or thinking about how to tweak and adjust their applications would be really helpful. I'm going to screen share. There it is. So just looking through the overview, 3 years. So it's a 3-year submit, like if it gets selected. So it's going to be on exhibit at the campus for 3 years. Submission guidelines. Artists are invited to submit images of pre-existing outdoor sculptures. Submissions must include detailed proposal outlining the concept, materials, dimensions, and installation requirements. Artists must provide installation hardware. May submit up to 3 works for consideration. Are to include a resume, CV, artist statement, and portfolio of up to 10 images. And then there's a link to the form. All professional level MSA members are eligible to apply. And if you're not a member right now, or if your membership has lapsed, it's a great time to re-up. And then you all are the committee that are going to be, plus Christian, going to be selecting. Selected artists receive $2,000 for the 3 years. And here are the dates. 31st, as we mentioned earlier, is the deadline. A notification of acceptance is the 15th, so that's your all's deadline. And then installation is September 16th. So with that reminder of the application panel, how do you encourage people to think about putting those components together? When you look at a portfolio or you're going through these images, you're thinking about these spaces, what are some things that are in your mind as being priorities? How do you start to weigh options? Chris, what's the top of your list whenever you're looking? Any?
Well, first and foremost is it's a 3-year call, so we're thinking about durability of the piece, and we're thinking about safety. So, you know, we got to check those boxes first. And I know we probably have some young artists who are interested in this opportunity. So, you know, I like to ask people, can a group of football players break this thing or flip it over? Like, how are we securing it? But also just, you know, I like to look at playground safety requirements, you know, in terms of, you know, gap openings, that sort of thing. So some of that's self-explanatory, but it's, I think everybody on the panel will spot something that's potentially unsafe. We only have, we have pad sculptures or pads for sculptures. Like we don't have pillars, or like large pedestals to put them on or anything like that. So we really just are kind of looking at work that it's going to be durable. It's going to catch the eye of the students, as we're very much kind of half commuter campus. So people are coming in from the parking lot, walking by sculptures, and they really do mention the sculptures that they see on campus and the ones that they're interested in.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. The durability part, but then also elements that the students might pick up on, even if they're not in art, but they start to notice and start to talk about. Julie, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I'm really thinking about how it's connecting, to the surface it's sitting on. That's kind of like my main kind of thing. And I'm okay with just like a, angle iron bracket. I've been working with some artists lately that like, it's like their mission to hide that bracket, and they have these little secret lift up things. They have these little parts of their sculptures that lift up, and then it's attached to the concrete, and then this form comes over. And so, you get these kind of seamless look. But if you're just starting out, and this might be, your first outdoor sculpture, go ahead and do that angle iron tab, if you will. But like, it's all okay, but it really is how it's sitting on the surface, how it connects to the surface. And that's my main thing. And then obviously, just like the way I feel about the work, like, does it make me feel something? Am
Hmm.
I, what new questions do I have when I'm looking at the work, right? And I don't need to know the answer to those questions. I just need to have questions. That's important for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, and it's kind of one of those things, like, you know it when you see it,
Nice. So obviously the again similar like how does it connect? Making sure that it connects in some way, but then having those components. But then when you're looking at it, even just in a digital image, that it for you as a juror that you're looking for something that's bringing out some questions, or that you find yourself inquisitive to learn more, and then you have the statements to then go and read. But images first. So if you don't have good images, it makes it hard to then want to enter and have those questions. I can see
Yeah,
that.
and so and forgive me for not knowing this. Do they have do the applicants have an unlimited amount of images that they can submit, or is it like 5? Is it, those
On, on the form, it says 10, and you can submit up to
okay.
3 pieces. So you could divide that up. So maybe one piece has like 3 images, another has 4 images. And so depending, now if you submit one piece, you could do like 10 images of one, maybe all the sides and some detail images, but up to
Nice.
10.
Cool. Thank you.
And Durant, as you're looking through the portfolios, as you're looking through the range of applicants, what are some things that run through your mind as you're starting to select, as you're starting to pull out maybe the top, because there's going to be 6. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah.
So 6 pieces out of however many are included. How do you start to get through that pile, that list of submissions?
So in a normal year, we have for the Yakima Sculpture Trio, there's me, my vote. I'm one of the jurors. There's about 5 or 6 of them, and then they get pooled in to make sort of a ranking, and then the main committee has to go through and think about a lot of the things that Chris and Julie said, like space, color. We have a converted golf course, a museum, a downtown city setting, and then on campus. So there's multiple sites with different needs. The ones out in the golf course are really big sites, so we're looking at some size. Does it fit out there? If it's too small, it doesn't work out there. If we have the cityscape, we have to think about how does this piece get lost, or is it strong enough to sit in that cityscape? The museum has specific needs along with the Arts Council because they have little kids running around and things like that. And so there's definitely some breakability things. And I think Chris talked about, can they play on it? Even if it says don't touch the sculpture, they're going to play on it.
True.
So there's all those things kind of going around. And originally in my first years, I was a little better at sort of defining the question here, which is, well, how do I pick what I like? Because I can't do that anymore because I'm an administrator now. And so I'm thinking about all that other stuff. But I think in the beginning it was, would I want that to be in my yard?
Mhm.
It breaks down to that. If I can see that in my space, or do I want to see that every day? It can involve a whole bunch of things from colors and things like that. But we have a student vote, we have an arts council vote, we have a museum vote, we have art department vote. So we have multiple levels of things going on. So usually we pick about 10 every year. We have 20 on a site, and it's a rotating. So there's something new every year, but it's a 2-year cycle. But we're looking to fill spaces that are gone. And how does that, we try to support traditional rusty things, really bright, shiny things, stainless things, so lots of color, things that kids will like in certain places, things that are more politically driven. Sometimes we do have to have a discussion about that. We had some really beautiful figurative pieces that had nudity in it, and we only got one site, and that was the school that said they would take that on. But at the time we didn't have the correct insurance for that artist, so we didn't get to have it. But all the other sites were worried about it offending, mothers and things like that. And it was definitely a thing. So there's lots of different scenarios to go through. And this time that's not my job, that's Chris's job. So I think, right, you get to work with the people and figure out what fits everywhere. So I'll be looking to see what kind of things I guess will be good in my yard. And I really like that space, that new space that Chris showed. I would hope that some people that do site-specific installation, I think that prospectus said that was welcome. I think it was also pad and not on pad, right, Chris? So there's a lot of opportunity for that. Proposals are not, except it has to be existing work though. So that may be a little challenging, but I've had pieces on Huntsville site before with spaces, and it's a beautiful place. And I've liked a lot of the sites. I specifically like Skip Van Houten's site, even without the piece there. That's a beautiful site. With that piece there, it really, as Julie said, those two pieces work in really good harmony because it's like a circle with a circular piece in it. So lots of different things come at play. It's more of a bigger problem when you get to the alternates, where there's like the last 2 or 3. How do you decide those? Becomes a little bit of a problem for the administration. But we always try to have at least one piece that is one of the jurors' favorite pieces. So they kind of single out that everybody gets one of their favorites in some way. But I think there's a lot of factors that come into play, and we'll see. I'm sure Julie will have a favorite, and I'll have a favorite, and Chris will have a favorite, and Christian will have a favorite. And then we'll go from there.
Mm-hmm. It's tricky. It's definitely tricky. And I think something, maybe advice to give people who are thinking of submitting, if you submit and getting a rejection from this doesn't necessarily mean that the piece is not a strong artwork. It's just sometimes it doesn't necessarily fit all of the components. And then as far as like the selection panel and how many pieces can go in. And
Yes.
so thinking of, yeah. So
and the jurors change sometimes too.
Mm-hmm. There's going to be a little bit of arm wrestling. I'm sure that happens as far as when it comes to like that decision process. And so when making that selection, you all are trying to like think of all of these components at one time. It's not just yes and no, but there's definitely a gradation of thoughts. That's what I'm hearing from the 3 of you when it comes to that assessment. How do you pick?
I didn't say it, but I'm sure that Julie and Chris say the same thing. But with all those colors and shiny and things, it's really a diversity. And sometimes it's cultural, sometimes it's political, but visually speaking, the diversity is an important part when we're making those, at least the last selection. A lot of time the 3 or 4 favorite ones are just, we're going to put those somewhere. But yeah, just, we have too much color over there. We need something that has some, there's just small things like that sometimes play. But we always try to put out in our emails to the artists that please apply again, because sometimes we only have a limited number of spots, and we really like that piece. I still, like I was telling Brian a little while ago, he applied one time and it was one of my favorites, but it was in the alternate selection, and I haven't gotten him to apply again, and I'm still badgering him about that. So hopefully Brian will apply again someday. But thanks.
I hope so. We're going to encourage him definitely, because his work is so amazing, and having that at the Ockness Trail at the same time, bring those 2 together. That's a great idea. Before Huntsville, maybe Brian would like to enter, and maybe there's a piece that'd be appropriate for this too. But we do have, thinking of Brian, I'm seeing some things come up in the chat. Brian has been continuing to help on YouTube and so forth, watching the stream. We have a few questions that have been coming up, and then we'll come back to some of my thoughts and questions that I have for you all, hearing how you've been responding. So one question, and then just to remind, how many pieces are going to be selected? Oh, sorry, Chris, you're muted.
The number that we have listed is 6.
6. And so for the 6, $2,000 goes to the artist to be able to help fund like travel and the loan agreement. And so I don't know if there's any rules of this. Could somebody get more than one in?
We are very flexible. We had one year where we how did we do that? I'm trying to remember exactly how it worked, but the artist submitted 2 separate pieces, but to us it read as like one. It should have been one piece, and so yeah, we brought, and we actually ended up purchasing that piece, and it's permanently on campus. So that's another thing. Like, if we really really like a piece, it could get purchased. So
That's good to know.
you never know. You never know.
When we do dual acceptance for an artist, it's usually that the pieces are kind of different, not necessarily the same, like I think Chris just said, but and that they fit the spaces. So this one works over here and this one works over here. But so we have done that on our site as well. I'm glad to hear that it's open too, Chris.
Yeah, and I would just, I mean, I think there was a question about pad size. I think with Durant, actually, my first year here, Durant, you dropped a piece. No, you picked the piece up, but you dropped off this bench piece. It was a really nice kind of hanging bench with chains. I'm sure some of the viewers know that piece, but I knew of a really wide sidewalk that could hold that piece where there's a ton of foot traffic, science students. And I was like, that's the spot for that piece, right? And so talked to facilities. They were on board as well. And that actually ended up being the site for that piece, but then subsequent pieces for a couple years as well. So I would say, don't worry necessarily about pad size. We've figured out how to install work in different. We've done 5-gallon buckets filled with cement buried in the ground, depending on the piece, right? But helping to anchor things down. We've worked with our landscaping crew to figure out how to keep mowers off of sculptures if they're, sitting directly on a site. So yeah, I would just say we're pretty flexible, and we're even Christian, the architect, is very much a creative, right? And so we like to kind of get off the pads when we can, when it's safe, so I would just, if you have something that you think is going to be safe and durable for 3 years, give a shot and submit it. We might find a way to integrate it into what we're doing.
Yeah, that piece, I loved that space you guys picked for that. I think it was next to the engineering, wasn't it?
Yeah, that space has a lot of engineer students that go there, but it's actually a science building.
But the lines with the building worked really well with the lines in my piece. So I thought it was really well selected, and that gets to Julie's ideas before about how does it speak to the space. And that was really well picked. That was good, nice spot.
Nice. And so it sounds like there are pads that are already done that are approximately 6 foot by 6 foot, but that we as artists aren't necessarily limited when we're thinking about the submission. And then you all as the selection panel, and then also once it hits campus, there might be some other discussions about location. So not to be held back by the 6 by 6, but for the right piece, it might be the appropriate location to install.
Absolutely. It's not that we're anti-pad, we're just pro site specific. That's all. So we'll make it work. If it can be safely installed, we can make it work.
I like that. You're all the Make It Happen team.
That's right. Yeah.
Nice. And we have one more question that showed up in the chat from about ephemeral work. And so is ephemeral work acceptable, or will it need to be there for the full duration of 3 years?
You know, I would say submit it, and we can have some real candid conversations about what that narrative looks like in terms of our campus community. And I think ephemeral work can totally be integrated into our sculpture trail, and we have the right committee that would be open to that sort of work. I think it's a big part about it is presenting it in a way that the non-art community understands this is what's going on with this piece that is disintegrating over the course of the next 2 years or 3 years or whatever it might be, right? And so then it becomes a discussion with the artists of like, okay, how do we present this in a way that the community's on board with the concepts behind how it was made? Does the material tie into the concept of the piece? And then how does that affect site? You know, in terms of Julie and I know the sites here on UAH very well, as does Christian. And so we might have a conversation about, hey, this ephemeral piece would go really well in the specific site that is historically tied to, UAH is placed on a plantation, former plantation, right? So there might be something there where the narratives could work really well in terms of not just whether something's colorful or metallic, but also the nature in which it was made and how that ties into potentially the work, the work and the site that it's on. So I would just say we're very much open to the potential work that is ephemeral. I would say, it's like with all work, but it's important to kind of get us in on why it's important that it's ephemeral. Does that tie into your concepts? And that helps us understand, but it also helps us communicate that to our broader campus and get the message across.
Nice. That's exciting to know. I hadn't thought about it in that way. And so that definitely helps. Thank you so much, Chris, for explaining that it might be a possibility. And so definitely anybody who's thinking about that as a path to definitely apply. Well, in closing, one last inquiry about the call from the three of you that are on the selection panel. Any words of encouragement that you would like to give to any artists thinking about applying? And so any advice or encouragement you would give them as they finalize? I know you've given so many ideas already, but last words.
Apply.
Durant.
Just keep applying. I mean, no matter what level you are, we have had undergraduate students get in our show, and we've had, I don't remember how old a couple. Carl's got the record probably with a lot of for age, but he's also had a lot of people in there called Billingsley. But just keep applying. I mean, don't. I think Chris or somebody said that, but don't let a rejection take you down the first time. Just keep going with whether this show or the next show or whatever. Keep putting them in there, and we hope that we get a lot of selections for this. It's like I said, it's a beautiful space. I've shown there myself, and I think anybody that gets in, the 6 that get in, I think it'll be really good for your revenue. So,
Thank you, Durant. Chris or Julie, any last words of encouragement for our audience?
Yeah, I mean, like, take as many pictures as you can, find that right one. I think sometimes we just, take maybe 7 shots of your sculpture. But just take as many as you can with your phone. And then when you're putting your, presentation together, you've got something to choose from, and don't be afraid of that detail shot. A lot of times that detail shot is like, wow, like I didn't even know that sculpture, had that nice little element on it, So don't be afraid to do that and let us, fill in the description box, let us know what the work is about. A lot of times people leave that out. They think that that's not as important, but it's important.
That makes sense. Thank you, Julie. Chris.
I would say, kind of reiterating what Durant and Julie are talking about is just apply. On this board, you have Julie Ward, who's with Arts Huntsville. Arts Huntsville has some great funding in terms of, a whole range of public art that we're bringing to Huntsville that is part of this kind of larger push for public art in Huntsville. You have Christian Reed, who's our campus architect, who has access to funding. He's always kind of on the look for, potentially purchasing a piece here or there. So it may be that your piece doesn't get selected or does get selected. Maybe one of us jumps on your website and we see a type of work that you're making, and all of a sudden you're getting an email from Julie or from Durant or from Christian saying, hey, you should really apply to our trail, or you should apply to this call. And so, just echoing what Durant's saying, yeah, when you got to be in it to win it, and you're just giving yourself exposure to some really great people. I'm really grateful to Durant and Julie for joining the committee. But you're just going to get exposure to people who are part of the public art movement, and that's just really great to be part of. And the more you do things like this, the more you apply, the better you get, and the better you understand. And it gets easier over time, the more you apply. So just apply.
Nice. Oh, that's great. That is wonderful. Good advice, all three of you. Thank you so much. And so a reminder, the deadline is coming up quickly. It's July 31st. And so if you're watching live right now, that's 6 days away to get your application finalized and submitted. The website page that I went to earlier, there's an apply here link that takes you to a Google form. It doesn't cost anything except being a member. So you have to make sure that your membership is active, pay that component for your professional membership, which will also help with a variety of other things, because then you can make sure that you can also apply to all of our other shows that gives you access to. And so again, a reminder, Confab is coming up. If you haven't marked it on your calendars, please do so. Join us in Huntsville in October 3rd and 4th, Friday and Saturday, to be able to see all of these sculptures in person, as well as all the other activities that will be part of that gathering. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Brian, for being online and watching the chat and posting the questions so we could see them. And so thank you for being a part of this team too. And so with that, we'll see you all later. We'll have more online events coming soon. So see you then. Bye. Hold on. End stream. And